The steering setup is not just a compromise, it's a silent war. From the moment Lewis Hamilton stepped into the SF25, one detail kept coming up. Power steering feel. It's not just preference, it's instinct, memory, muscle. Yet Ferrari refuses to map the system the way he wants. Their excuse? It takes too long. That's not logistics, that's a coded message. Sources inside Maranello hint that during Hamilton's runs at Silverstone and Spa, he reported non-linear resistance before apex, a classic trait of misaligned steering feedback. On radio, silence. In the garage, shrugs. This isn't oversight, it's containment. He feels the delay before the corner even begins, said one insider. In 12 years at Mercedes, Hamilton had his car's front-end behavior dialed to millimetric perfection. At Ferrari, he's piloting a ship whose rudder resists him. On purpose? If Ferrari wanted to unleash him, they would. But maybe, just maybe, someone inside fears what happens if Lewis gets exactly what he needs. Because while Hamilton wrestles with a steering wheel that speaks a foreign language, Leclerc just left a simulator session. And what he said next exposed a fracture the team can no longer hide. In Ferrari's simulator suite, words matter less than pauses. After a long run simulating Spa's Sector 2, Leclerc reportedly removed his headset and said quietly, "That setting, it doesn't respond like before." What seems like a passing remark, it was a cipher, not about setup, about power. Leclerc had been testing a steering configuration closer to Hamilton's preference, likely by mistake. The feedback? Jittery, over-responsive, alien, and he didn't like it. The result? That configuration was shelved, quietly, permanently. The engineers called it driver feedback alignment. What it really meant was, Leclerc gets veto power. Hamilton's demands would now be filtered through political calibration, and this is where the fracture deepens. Two elite drivers, two fundamentally different steering philosophies, and one car being built on top of a silent hierarchy. So while the garage preaches unity, telemetry tells another story. One driver adapts to discomfort, the other avoids it entirely. And the most dangerous signal? Hamilton hasn't complained publicly, but his radio silence is echoing through the paddock. Lewis Hamilton's silence isn't surrender, it's preparation. At Silverstone and in simulator sessions before Spa, his radio was eerily calm during critical setup windows. No frustration, no sarcasm, just notes. He's learned that at Ferrari, speaking too soon isn't power, it's vulnerability. Behind closed doors, Riccardo Adami continues to work both garages, but sources reveal Hamilton's setup requests are often held for further review, while Leclerc's are actioned within the hour. Same request, different response time. At the British GP, Hamilton asked for a specific engine braking modulation to match his instinctive corner entries. The team delayed, citing system constraints. Days later, Leclerc's car showed nearly identical changes during a private test. Coincidence or filtering? "We'll log that for future consideration," Adami told Hamilton. That phrase, repeated more than once, has become Ferrari's polite way of saying, "Not for you." And so, Hamilton keeps listening, because he knows Spa is coming, and with it, his first real chance to turn silence into shock. Every champion pays a price to win, but what if the real cost is identity? In preparation for Spa, Hamilton reviewed simulator runs from previous weekends and found a recurring betrayal. The steering response curve remains tuned for someone else's hands. The resistance near corner entry? Still non-linear. The delay in rotation? Still present. His requests? Still under consideration. Lewis needs bite on turn-in, a former Mercedes engineer explained. Ferrari's setup feels too safe, too sanitized. Ferrari calls this a transitional phase, but the truth is harsher. It's a standoff. Leclerc's preferences define the baseline. Any deviation requires negotiation, and so the SF25 rolls into Spa with unresolved conflict at its core. Two drivers, two philosophies, one car. Hamilton adapts in silence, logging what works, what resists, building a dossier of ignored suggestions. It's not just technical, it's psychological. He's not just testing setups, he's testing the limits of Ferrari's willingness to evolve. And when FP1 begins at Spa, the real question won't be lap time. It'll be whether Ferrari finally lets Lewis steer his own destiny. The trucks are in Spa, the engineers are already there, and inside Ferrari's garage, a quiet rebellion is brewing. Sources close to the team confirm Hamilton has submitted a setup request for FP1 that bypasses the usual review chain. It includes a steering rack calibration nearly identical to his 2020 Mercedes spec, tighter on center, aggressive torque resistance, optimized for late braking and fast directional change. Normally, such a deviation would trigger internal debate. This time, he's pushing it through, naming performance clause triggers in his contract. In other words, do it or explain it publicly. If I can't feel the car, I can't fight with it, he told one senior engineer. Leclerc's side isn't pleased. One insider described the mood as tense but quiet, because if Hamilton's setup works, it rewrites who dictates direction at Ferrari. This isn't just about Spa, it's about legitimacy. If Hamilton proves his steering spec unleashes pace, Ferrari can no longer pretend compromise is necessary, and in FP1, every corner he takes will send a message, not just to Ferrari, but to the paddock watching in silence. The garage is quiet, unnaturally so. Spa looms, and with it, the first real-world test of Hamilton's rebellion. Ferrari's engineers know what's coming. Hamilton has pushed through a steering setup for FP1 that mirrors his most dominant years. Heavier torque on entry, sharper front-end load transfer, and aggressive lateral reactivity. On paper, it's radical. In his hands, it could be unstoppable. It either proves everything or nothing, one senior mechanic muttered. The tension? Palpable. Leclerc will run a modified version of his trusted baseline, stable, progressive, risk-averse. But the clash isn't in sectors, it's in philosophy. Because if Hamilton's car dances through Eau Rouge and lasers through Stavelot, the myth that Ferrari's way is the way collapses. This isn't just a practice session, it's a referendum. Inside the team, eyes won't be on lap times, they'll be on behavior. Will Hamilton trust the car? Will the car finally speak his language? Or will Ferrari find a way to say, once again, not yet? Because once FP1 begins, every corner becomes a vote, and the team must choose who they're really building around. Spa hasn't started. But inside Ferrari, the atmosphere already feels like post-race damage control. Hamilton's setup changes for FP1 have set off a quiet panic. His engineers are preparing a run plan unlike anything Ferrari has sanctioned this year. Tighter steering resistance, sharper torque gradient, a front end designed for instinct, not simulation averages, and that's the real threat. Because if it works, it doesn't just validate Hamilton, it invalidates months of Leclerc-led philosophy. If we greenlight this, we're admitting the baseline's wrong, one insider confessed. Leclerc, sensing the shift, has grown unusually quiet in pre-weekend briefings. No comments on feel, no small talk in the garage. Just silence, the kind that signals pressure. There's no direct confrontation yet, but every setting change, every line on the telemetry sheet is becoming political. And if Hamilton's car feels like an extension of himself in FP1, the question won't be lap time, it'll be survival, for setups, for influence, for internal truth. Because if he finds flow before Leclerc finds grip, Ferrari's hierarchy will face a truth they've spent years trying to delay. This isn't about Spa, it never was. It's about a legacy Ferrari doesn't know how to handle. They brought Lewis Hamilton not just for victories, but for transformation. Yet every time he tries to reshape the car, the team recoils. Not out of logic, out of fear. Because if his methods work, everything before him is questioned, including Leclerc's reign. You can't change the DNA of Ferrari, a former strategist once said. But Hamilton is trying to rewrite it strand by strand, and maybe that's what scares them. Not that he'll fail, but that he'll succeed. That his steering feel, his brake modulation, his racecraft could expose years of misdirected development. That he'll force Ferrari to admit, greatness doesn't come from heritage alone. It comes from surrendering ego to truth. As the Spa weekend arrives, the setup isn't just mechanical, it's metaphorical. Two drivers, two visions, one institution caught between past and possibility. And so we ask, is Ferrari afraid of losing control, or of what happens when Hamilton finally takes it? If you believe this battle goes deeper than the stopwatch, subscribe. The real story is just beginning.